Welcome back to the Micromodules series, Understanding Bias in Epidemiological Studies. In this module, we will be focusing on selection bias caused by non-responsive participants. The objectives of this module are to explain how non-responsive participants may lead to selection bias, illustrate it with a hypothetical cross-sectional study, introduce how to address the bias, and explain its difference from the bias arising from sampling procedure. Non-response bias occurs when participants who refuse to join or drop out of study systematically differ from those who are eventually included in the analysis, making the final study sample differ from the original selected participants, thus unrepresentative of the target population. As demonstrated in this figure, the initially selected participants are representative of the target population, with 7 men in color green and 3 men in yellow. However, during the data collection process, the 3 yellow men are non-responsive or have dropped out, and only the green men remain in the study and are eventually included in the analysis, leading to the final sample systematically different from the initially selected participants as well as the target population. Here is an example of a survey on prevalence of depression among medical students. A random sample of 500 medical students was selected and invited to complete a depression screening questionnaire. 400 out of 500 students completed the questionnaire. The results showed that 40 out of the 400 respondents were identified as having depression, resulting in an estimated prevalence of 10%. However, after review of medical records among the 100 non-respondents, the researchers found that 60 of them had a medically diagnosed depression, which means that the true prevalence of depression is 20% in the total sample of 500 medical students, much higher than the 10% observed in the respondents. So, in this example, the prevalence of depression is underestimated due to non-response bias, as students with diagnosed depression were less likely to respond to the questionnaire. So, how to reduce non-response bias in epidemiological studies? There are several commonly used strategies. First, make the survey questionnaire user-friendly and short, so that the selected participants are more willing to respond and complete the survey. Second, ensure confidentiality and emphasize importance of the survey, which can reduce non-response due to concerns about the privacy and security of their information. Third, make efforts to call back or revisit people who could not be contacted the first time. Lastly, give incentives to encourage the respondents to stay in the study. In the previous module, we introduced selection bias arising from inappropriate sampling procedure, which occurs at the sample selection stage when the people who are selected or invited for the study differ from those who are not. While the selection bias discussed in this module arises from non-response and occurs during the data collection stage after the sample is selected, this bias occurs because some of the selected or invited people, which is a representative sample, do not respond to the survey, and these non-respondents differ from those who respond. Both types of selection bias will result in a final study sample that is not representative of the target population. Using probability sampling methods can help reduce selection bias arising from inappropriate sampling procedure. While for selection bias arising from non-response, taking various measures to increase response rates is the key. Okay, in this module we discussed how selection bias can arise from non-response and the strategies to mitigate it. In next module, we will introduce another type of selection bias, which is called Neyman bias. Thank you for listening.